If we were to attack Iran, not only would they strike back, but they would strike back and hit us where it hurts, economically. They would shut down the Strait of Hormuz, where about 30% of the world's oil travels every day. They would relentlessly bomb oil fields all across Saudi Arabia. They would attack the United Arab Emirates and bomb them into oblivion. They would attack U.S. air bases that are all around the Gulf states. They would launch missiles into Tel Aviv. The reality is, if we were to attack Iran and blow up a few of their underground nuclear program sites, not only is it an uncertainty that we would completely destroy it, it is a certainty that they would retaliate very strongly. This actually comes right here, hot off the press. Trump waved off Israeli strike after divisions emerged in his administration. Israel developed plans for attacking Iranian nuclear facilities that would have required U.S. assistance, but some administration officials had doubts. W. We don't want this fucking war, man. But anyway, let's get into it. Let's read through this real quick. We're not going to read the entire article, guys, but we are going to read some of it. So it goes here. Israel plans to strike Iranian nuclear sites as soon as next month, but was waved off by President Trump in recent weeks in favor of negotiating a deal with Tehran to limit its nuclear program, according to administration officials and others briefed on the discussions. Mr. Trump made his decision after months of internal debate over whether to pursue diplomacy or support Israel in seeking to set back Iran's ability to build a bomb, at a time when Iran has been weakened militarily and economically. I've talked about this with you guys extensively, okay? Two things that have weakened Iran, okay? They have crippling sanctions, okay? So in other words, many countries can't work with Iran and do trade because the U.S. is basically telling them, hey, if you do trade with Iran, we're not going to do trade with you. So these countries basically like, damn, we need the U.S. market, so they don't do business with Iran. Obviously, Iran has ways of getting around this where they, maybe sell their products to another country and then that country sells it and they get a cut. They're still finding ways around it, but obviously, these sanctions have been hurting them financially, okay? And it's been hurting their economy. And this is why the regime has been getting a lot of pushback. Sanctions, the purpose of sanctions, guys, just so you understand, whenever countries use sanctions against other countries, typically it's the United States or a Western power uses sanctions, they use it to make that country suffer economically in a hope that the people that live in that country will rise up and overthrow their government. Now, with that said, does that lead to that typically? No. But if you have the people angry from economic sanctions, you use the CIA, you use intelligence agencies, you use maybe another friendly proxy power, you can overtake and topple a government. We've done it many times, okay? So sanctions are a way to financially starve a country, and then you use other intelligence assets and resources and techniques to destabilize and eventually overthrow a government to put a friendly government in that does not challenge your authority. So with Iran, they've had crippling sanctions that have hurt them economically from a really significant standpoint. So if I'm not mistaken, I think China is the #1 buyer of their oil and some other countries. Now, with that said, that's on the economic side. On the military side, we know that Israel has been systematically dismantling and destroying all of Iran's aides. Who are Iran's primary aides? Well, the axis of resistance is made up of a couple of countries. And I've talked about this before, but, I guess we got a lot of new viewers here, etc. Maybe I'll show you. I think it'll be better if I show you guys. Right, so let's go on the map, back to this map right here, the Middle Eastern map, okay? So as you guys know, here's the Middle East. Here is Iran, right here, capital Tehran. You have Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen, all right? Mostly the western part. This is where the Houthis are based out of, okay? So in the south, you have the Houthis in Yemen. Here, you have Gaza, which has Hamas, basically right on Israel's doorstep. Then, in the north, you have Lebanon, which is home to Hezbollah. Then, you have Syria right here, okay? And Damascus is right here, right, almost not too far from the Lebanon border. You have Iraq, and you have Iran. So, basically, Iran, right, is the superpower, right, in this region. And what Iran basically does is it supplies weapons, ammunition, support, money, logistics, equipment, whatever it may be. And what it does is it uses Iraq and Syria as almost like a bridge to Lebanon, because Hezbollah is the most capable fighting force in the region that's close enough to Israel. Because at the end of the day, guys, Iran is pretty far from Israel, right? So they need to rely heavily upon the proxies to wage the warfare, okay? And Hezbollah has been shooting rockets into Israel since October 7th, okay? And the reason why they've been doing this from a strategic standpoint is because if Hezbollah is launching rockets into Israel, northern Israel, Haifa, they have to evacuate something like 60 to 100,000 Israelis and move them more south, right? That forces the IDF to stage soldiers up north, okay? Now, why is this important? From a military strategic standpoint, this is important because that means that the IDF cannot send all of their sources, or excuse me, all of their resources into Gaza. Okay? After October 7th happened, Israel declared war on Gaza and invaded on a ground assault, as well as using an air assault. But they couldn't deploy all their resources because a significant amount of IDF soldiers had to stay up north here to maintain the northern border, okay? To include the Golan Heights area as well, which is also occupied by Israel. So they needed the resources here to protect their northern border and kind of mitigate the constant rockets coming in. These rockets that Hezbollah were using were being supplied by Iran. So when October 7th happened, it gave Israel the pretense it needed to finally wage war on all of its enemies, okay? And we talked about them with the axis of resistance. So after October 7th happened, Israel systematically went through Gaza. They started up north here and worked their way all the way down to Rafah, okay? This culminated with the assassination of Yahya Sinwar, okay? This guy right here. Put a face to name for you guys, okay? Who was the head of the military wing of Hamas, all right? So after they killed him, they began their assault and their ground trek into Lebanon to fight Hezbollah, who were shooting rockets into the northern part of Israel, because this caused a logistical nightmare for them because they had to evacuate like 60,000 plus Israelis, okay? That is where the famous pager assault happened, or attack happened, where Mossad activated a bunch of pagers, beepers, radios, and cell phones and other communication devices, basically, and blew up in a bunch of Hezbollah fighters' hands, okay? Some were killed, some were seriously maimed and injured, but it sends a very clear message to Hezbollah that Israel isn't going anywhere, especially since they had these bombs in these devices for 10 years. I did a deep dive on this on another video if you guys want, okay? Mods, can one of you guys link it in the chat for them, please? So after that was done, they continued the ground assault. They could not make it all the way to where they needed to get to because the goal was to get it to Beirut, but they obviously couldn't do that. So what ended up happening, chat, was they bombed Beirut. And not only did they bomb them, they fucking destroyed it. And in the process, they were able to kill this guy, Hassan Nasrallah. All right? They were able to kill him. Now, after they killed him, they set their sights on Syria. Why? Because Syria is one of the main bridges between Iran and Hezbollah, one of the more capable fighting forces against Israel. And they realized that if we can topple Syria, their ability, Hezbollah's ability, to recover and recuperate would be significantly diminished. Remember, the pager attack occurred, and they assassinated their top people. So they needed to stop the flow of weapons and resources coming into Lebanon so that Hezbollah would not be able to repair. So what did they do? As soon as the ceasefire was negotiated between Israel and Lebanon, because there wasn't a ceasefire negotiated because Lebanon was taking on too many casualties, rebel fighters from Idlib, which had a bunch of different Arab militia fighters that are anti-Bashar al-Assad, launched an attack into Aleppo, and they took it over within a day. And mind you guys, it had taken the Syrian government, along with the proxies, years to capture Aleppo from these rebel forces. The rebel forces went back into Aleppo and took it within a day. Now, this was the beginning of the end, because Russia, who had been able to protect Bashar al-Assad for many years during the Syrian civil war, was no longer able to protect him. And the reason why is because they have their hands full with what's going on in Ukraine, right? Over here. They're literally waging a war up in this area, okay? Pretty much what Russia's been able to do is get a significant amount of eastern Ukraine, but they're fighting every single day. So a lot of their resources had to be diverted back on this front. So that left Syria very weak and vulnerable, okay? Tartus, which used to be a critical strategic point for Russia, was overwhelmed. And the air support that Syria used to rely upon to hold these rebels in place was gone. So with Hezbollah being significantly weakened and Russia's hands full, Bashar al-Assad, this guy, Again, put a face and name for you guys, okay? Bashar al-Assad was very vulnerable. So the rebel fighters took over Aleppo and then worked their way down the M5 highway, took Hama, Homs, and then they worked their way to Damascus. Within 2 weeks, they took over Syria and toppled the government. Bashar al-Assad, days before the rebels arrived in Damascus, because they would have killed him, fled to Russia on asylum. So Syria, a critical member of the axis of resistance that would be the bridge between Iran and Lebanon, was now completely disrupted and dismantled. After that was done, at the end of last year, they waited for Trump to be sworn in. Once Trump was sworn in January, because remember, Syria was toppled in late December. Once Trump was sworn in, now they finally had someone that can lift the restrictions. They were able to start using the 2,000 bombs, the 2,000-pound bombs, etc. Luckily, when Trump came in, he was able to negotiate a ceasefire. And Israel received, what, maybe 20 or 30 of their hostages back. But the ceasefire ended in March, pretty much. And we're back to war. So, Israel is looking at this. Oh, and also when Trump came into office, he's been relentlessly bombing the Houthis here. Now you guys are probably wondering, Myron, why is Donald Trump attacking the Houthis so viciously, but he's not attacking Hezbollah, he's not attacking Syria, and he's not attacking Iran, or even Iraq for that matter? The main reason why he's attacking the Houthis so hard is because the Houthis have been causing a nightmare, an economic nightmare, by boarding ships in the Red Sea, the Strait of Hormuz, and the Gulf of Aden. Basically, the Houthis don't just double as a paramilitary organization, they also double as pirates. And one of the things they do is they board big freighter ships and they basically take control of it. So we're talking about billions of dollars in commerce gone like that or delayed. Okay, they take the crews captive and they basically fuck up world trade. So the United States said, okay, no more. We're going to start bombing these guys relentlessly. So that's what's been going on. So as you guys can see, Iran, who had done a really good job of creating this proxy network to insulate themselves from Israel's power, is now finding itself very alone. The Houthis are being bombed in the south by the United States. Hezbollah has effectively been disrupted and dismantled and can no longer regenerate itself because Syria has been completely dismantled and disrupted. New regime is in there of Sunni Muslims. There are sectarian issues between Shiites and Alawanis, all this other bullshit, religious stuff. We won't get into it too much. But the sectarian issues are creating political problems where there's fucking all kinds of stuff going on in Syria. There's a new president there, Jolani, former Al-Qaeda member, who quite frankly doesn't care about attacking Israel like that. He just wants to reclaim Syria. So Hezbollah, disrupted. Syria, toppled. Hamas, destroyed. Outside of guerrilla warfare, where they basically pop out the tunnel for a little bit, shoot some IDF members, or blow up a tank, and then run back into the tunnels. But for the most part, Hamas's leadership is gone. They're all dead. Ismail Haniyeh was killed in Iran, and Yahya Sinwar was killed in Rafah. So what's left, chat? What's left is Iran. And the last thing that Iran has to defend itself, now that its proxies are gone, are its ballistic missile system, its air defense system, and its nuclear program. That's all that's left. Okay? But with that said, Iran is a formidable opponent. I've talked about this, but I'll talk about it again, just so you guys understand. If we were to attack Iran, which we would absolutely win, it would cause us great problems. Why? Well, because what Iran would do with their sophisticated missile program, because they have thousands, hundreds of thousands of missiles, drones, etc., what they would do is they would start to relentlessly attack our allies in the Middle East, the Gulf states, Qatar, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, etc., right? And they would bomb the oil fields. The Houthis have already done this, and it cost a lot of money for Saudi Arabia. And they were using basic missiles. If we were to attack Iran, not only would they strike back, but they would strike back and hit us where it hurts, economically. They would shut down the Strait of Hormuz, where about 30% of the world's oil travels every day. They would relentlessly bomb oil fields all across Saudi Arabia. They would attack the United Arab Emirates and bomb them into oblivion. They would attack U.S. air bases that are all around the Gulf states. They would launch missiles into Tel Aviv here, and they would do some serious damage. So the reality is, if we were to attack Iran and blow up a few of their underground nuclear program sites, not only is it an uncertainty that we would completely destroy it, it is a certainty that they would retaliate very strongly. And we probably wouldn't be able to get it on one bombing campaign. We'd have to go back in there again and again and again to ensure that we destroyed their nuclear program. And keep in mind, they have the capability to put together a nuclear weapon. Now, would it be refined? Would it be, top of the line? Probably not. But, like I said before, and as the other geopolitical analyst said, which he's correct about, Iran is a nuclear threshold state, which means they can get one together within a month or so. Okay? They've been preparing for this fight for 40 plus years. Okay? So they would hurt us economically with closing off trade and destroying oil fields. Then they would attack U.S. air bases or U.S. military sites all across the Gulf and kill U.S. soldiers. Then they would attack Israel and kill Israelis. Okay? And we'd have to go back in there again to try to destroy all their nuclear sites. And then on top of that, they have a very good air defense system. Can we disrupt and dismantle it? For sure, but it's not going to be easy. Also, Iran is a huge country. Huge. Big population. This isn't Iraq 2003. This is a far more formidable foe. So, and then on top of that, the last thing I'll say is not only would they be able to create a nuclear weapon, they would probably use it at that point. So as you guys can see, the goal isn't about winning the war, because winning the war wouldn't be worth the cost. We would create economic turmoil. We'd lose thousands of American soldiers. We'd lose thousands of Israelis. We would effectively destroy trade. The oil market would go wild. Someone was saying, I was reading something, or watching a video, I forget if I was reading it or whatever, that if Iran cut the Strait of Hormuz and started bombing these oil fields, and there was a 30-day delay, gas prices would shoot up to like $11 a gallon, assuming your gas station even had the oil in the first place. So, again, I know this is like a doomsday scenario, chat, but this is what's realistically could happen. Okay? These are very sensitive talks, because Israel is under an enormous amount of pressure to deal the final blow. Iran has been the only country that stood between Israel and hegemony for decades. Because guess what? Every other country has been pretty much destroyed. Libya, destabilized. Egypt, cucked. Jordan, cucked. We pay them money to play nice with Israel. Sudan, civil war, destroyed. Algeria, Tunisia, Morocco, all destabilized. Who's left? Iran. Because the Gulf states here, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Oman. Oman is an ally to Iran. But these Gulf state countries are cucked to the west. So they're either cucked, being paid off, or toppled and destroyed. The only country that's still standing up to Israel is Iran. Do you guys see where I'm going with this now? Does it make sense why these negotiations are so critical? We've never had this event before, guys. All the stars are lined up. And Israel is going to do everything in their power to ensure that they finish the job. They used October 7th as a pretense to wage this regional war all across the Middle East. They're fighting on multiple different fronts. Yemen, Lebanon, Syria, Golan Heights. There's been attacks even on Iraq, Iran. So this is what's going on, chat. It's a very complex situation, and I know I threw a lot at you guys there, but that's what's going on in the Middle East. Okay? Give me ones in the chat if that all makes sense.